Thank you for having me. When I was asked to do this talk, welfare was the number one subject, and I guess what I've tried to do in this talk is look at 4 different things that we have seen during this last 12 months that will be of some interest to you, and I'll go the right way first, some interest to you, and will probably generate quite a few questions afterwards. So, starting off first of all, Nick mentioned it, it's the Horse Welfare Board. Okay, the Horse Welfare Board met for the second time yesterday. The Welfare Board was set up. It is an industry-wide based board. It has members from all jurisdictions. It has an independent chair, Barry Johnson, who you will know from World Horse Welfare, Tracy Crouch, who is the MP and independent. It has myself and Alison Intercap on there. It has James Gibbon from the Trainers Association, Charlie Liverton from the Racehorse Association, and 2 members from the racecourses, Simon Knapp, veterinarian, and Carolyn Davies. This is set up to be industry-wide. It is to cover the remit of the industry, and is to develop industry responsibility as far as welfare is concerned. You can see here, it aims to look at from the beginning of a foal's life all the way through to whatever that post-racing career looks like and however it lasts for. So it's a collaborative of key elements. It's cross-industry projects that will go into there. The leadership is from each area. So the TBA will have input into this, and I've been asked a number of times that the TBA is not represented directly on the Welfare Board, and I accept that. But the TBA will have input directly into that board. The board will be asking the TBA to be setting up and looking at strategies, programs that they'd like to have either financed, funded, or considered. The same would occur from ROR, so they're looking at the whole post-racing retirement part of it. The BHA would still have control over regulatory functions, so we would be still having control over anything to do with what we were sitting on regulation. But importantly, these other groups would be looking at inputs into it. So it might be from the race courses, it comes from the trainers, it'll come from the breeders into this part. Importantly, and Nick pointed out to it, a major function in this thing is communications. So there's a whole piece of the budget for the Welfare Board which will be involved in communications. It comes from the Horse Comes First and Racing Futures. And discovering about making the industry speak in one voice. We have lots and lots of great stories to tell in here, but we probably don't, as an industry, speak with one voice, and we need to do that. So there is funding set there's funding set aside, and there will be a project manager in that Welfare Board, and part of that will be developing communication focus. There will be some workshops done, there'll be some focus groups developed to see what does the industry think are important welfare concerns. That will be fed back into the Welfare Strategy Committee and develop strategies from that point. Initial priorities in that at the present time, as I said, we met yesterday, and I can tell you the first thing we looked at and we're looking at is fatalities. The reason for that is because, as Nick has pointed out, there was a parliamentarian piece out in 2018 signed by 100,000 people looking at whether the BHA in fact was the right model to be a regulator. We met with the Minister for Welfare, and I can tell you his number one priority is fatalities, and his number one priority is can we make fatalities look like they're zero, which is it's impossible to do. What we need to do, and what the Welfare Board have done, is to say to him, we will never make fatalities zero. But there is a body of work and study that we're doing so that we are continually assessing what are the risk factors for horses in racing, on a race course, not on a race course, so that we can convince him, his constituents, that racing is doing absolutely everything it can to minimise the risk factors in any of these fatalities and long-term injuries. By doing that, we're looking at things like obstacle design. So we've gone back and said, okay, let's have another look at both the padded hurdle, looking at we've engaged some members from the FEI the 3-day team to look at how they have set up their 3-day events and their cross-country events. We've looked at frangible pins for hurdles. That's all part of that. That's been funded. There's a pilot study going on for some other ones. There will be a WIP evidence-based accumulation, not a review. It's been a piece of funding set aside for a consultant to look at every aspect of the WIP, from technical considerations within the BHA, international jurisdictions. There is a BHA ethics committee set up, it's been functioning. These guys have sat back over the last 6 months and reviewed every piece of scientific literature, looking at exactly what does the WIP do, how does it work, does it put pain in there, what is the response of the horse, are we doing the right thing, does it hurt, does it not hurt, is it just a public perception or not. We'll also be having a whole piece here from the board is industry attitudes. So they'll be going out and taking public attitudes to just what the WIP does. That will come through in somewhere to November as a large package back to the Welfare Board for consideration. And that would be an industry consideration of what to do in the next steps with the WIP. Not making a WIP review, but what are the next steps? So what we're trying to do here is gather all the information in one place, make sure we've covered all the subject matters off, and then as an industry, go forward and make maybe an appropriate decision of what we do. Do we leave it the way it is? Do we change the function? What may be? And you can see in the media there's a lot of debate, from everything from disqualifying horses to increasing penalties to having higher fees to whatever. So that's there. Communications, racing futures, and the horse comes first, both to be done. There are some other subjects in there as well being funded. There's a piece here from the Bristol University, and it's developing over the last 18 months a equine welfare assessment tool. This is 18 months into work. It's got another 18 months to run. And what we're trying to do here is be able to tell back here the public that we can assess welfare in any racing stable on a continuous, benchmark, consistent system, and sell that story to the public and say, that's what welfare is in racing thoroughbreds in the UK. By able to benchmark it and measure it consistently, we can also go and make, if we need to, suggestions and improvements to what may be some premises that are not at the level that you'd like to do. And they are welfare-associated improvements that would go with that. This is in its second stage now. There's been funding put aside, and over the next 6 to 8 months, just over 200 racing stables will be assessed to make that tool validated. That research will then close off, and hopefully we'll have a piece of work that we can move forward to, publish scientifically, and demonstrate exactly what equine welfare levels look like in racing stables. Now, I see this being able to be moved on to other pursuits, whether it's breeding establishments, retirement homes, pre-racing, whatever it might be, eventually. I think it's a really nice piece of work. From there, we'll go to 30-day foal notification. When I first came here in 2017, you guys registered your foals up until they're 12 months old. My second meeting is I sat down and with Jamie Steer and the TBA and looked at developing a 30-day foal notification. Why do we need 30-day foal notification? Well, there's probably a number of things. We need it because of traceability. We need it because of traceability, not just for Brexit, which is important, and that's come along afterwards. We need it for traceability because we need to know where and how many of these horses, where are they in the system? Where do we lose them if we do lose them? Okay. And from a Brexit point of view, we need traceability to be able to say, if I'm exporting a horse or sending a mare to Ireland or to France after whatever happens at Brexit, how do I know that I can do that? And part of that's going to be you're going to need to have point of origin identification for where you're sending that from, and some other biosecurity measures, whether that's testing, whether that's veterinary certification or whatever. But it's quite an important part. So traceability first for that. It also means that prohibited substance at all times, which came up, part of you signing up to the 30-day from the foal notification is we are signing up to the IFHA International Agreement on Breeding and Racing. It says that under Section 6, prohibited at all times substance cannot exist in racehorses. And so from the time the foal is notified at 30 days on, that comes into play, and those substances could be tested for. Moving forward, and you have to think about this in the near future, I sit on the IFHA's Gene Anti-Doping Committee. Right now, they are toying with the idea that they need to have traceability of your 30-day foals to ensure that there is no genetic modifications that may occur. So you can see that we've put in place here last year a 30-day foal notification. It hasn't been smooth going. There have been hiccups. But down here, there are pluses for us in place. We're moving in the right direction. Okay, so what's happened? 2018 crop, there were 92.3% of that foal crop were notified within 30 days. At that time, there was still some paper notification to Weatherby, so there's 76 foals. There was one foal that didn't complete registration. Okay, this is a fantastic number for the first year. This year so far, I can tell you the notification looks at 96.34. That was just out of 4,945 foals. Okay. We do test. There are some, I know that some people have been over that 30-day foal notification because of different circumstances. What we need to do is, if you are over that 30-day foal notification, and I'll come to a checking system in a minute, you need to, as soon as you do that, try and notify my anti-doping department so that we can work out how it comes. There are 30 foals that have been tested this year to date because they did not satisfy the 30-day foal notification. But those 30 foals, and some of those were probably 2 and 3 months later than the 30 days. So at some point we have to sort of draw a line in the sand about what's the rule we're going to apply. And that's why at that case. But look guys, I think from a breeder's point of view, it's been a fantastic response. This is a real plus. What I really want to point out to you as well is there's this little thing called POTRA. I don't know how many of you know about this, but if you do your 30-day foal notification and you want to go back a few days to later and check that it's actually Weatherby's have got it done and there's been no hiccups, go on to POTRA, get that down, search, put in there, do the search and make sure it's been done. Because I can tell you back here, you know, the story is I thought I put it through, I thought it happened, I checked off, or I put 56 foals through and I missed one, and I didn't know I missed that one. And I don't go back and look until 3 months later. And now we're looking at what do we do with that 3 months later, because now it's way outside our time limit, and we're saying, okay, you've got to go and get testing, it's 625 pounds, nobody's happy. So if I can say to you, the take-home message in all of this is, if we can do the 30-day foal notifications, there are more than one very, very good reason to do it, and then there is this follow-up if you want to check. Okay, so 30-day foal notification. My other love for this year has been this drug, Regulate. Back at the end of 2018 in Australia, they came, the racing establishment there tested some, I raced a urine sample on a horse that in fact had 2 substances in it, trendione and trenbolone, which are anabolic agents. Okay, so these are under IFHA Section 6, prohibited at all times substance. So they went back and checked, and this horse had been on Regulate oral. So here's the issue. Regulate, we think, or Altrenagist, is a progesterone drug that perhaps cannot be produced without either trendione and trenbolone in it. And the issue is both of these are anabolic agents. If the take-home message from me today are this: pregnant mares, happy for you to use this medication for estrus control, as an abortic drug, whatever. We have no jurisdiction, we have no problem about it at all. The question you guys ask is, if my mare is on this and then my foal folds, does that foal test positive for one of these 2 at a later date? We've done some work with James where we've sampled some mares, we've sampled some foals this year. There's some work in place. Presently, my gut feeling is we are not going to see these 2 products in either blood or hairs in those foals, okay? This is where the issue is a bit cloudier. Yearling preps, okay. And remembering, if we walked into a racing yard and tested a horse out of competition and found Altrenagist, we would then proceed to look for these 2 medications, okay. This is not a prohibited all-time substance, these 2 are, all right. Yearling preps. The advice from us is the possession, administration, or attempted administration could amount to a breach of the rules. Some yearling prep people use this drug to keep mares or fillies off season beforehand. If we went into a sales yard and tested if they were on Altrenagist and found this medication, that'd be fine. We would probably have a discussion. We would then go and test for these two. If we found these two in that preparation, then that's a prohibited at all times substance, and that horse is suddenly looking at a 12 months, cannot race. Okay. So the ruling here is we don't, in this, again, don't remember, the BHA, we don't regulate this area, but the advice is to be very, very careful about the use of this drug in this group here. But in this group here, I have no issues, and I encourage you, if you've been on that with your veterinary surgeons, to continue to do so. Last one I thought we'd talk about, equine influenza or influenza. In October, November of last year, there was a case of influenza that was reported in Belgium, and it was a clade 1 equine virus. Clade 1 equine virus come from America and South America. The clade that circulates, or the virus type that circulates in the UK and Europe, is clade 2. We hadn't seen this guy since 2003. Since then, it spread across some of Europe and it popped into the UK, and then you saw in February that we had some cases reported in licensed premises. This guy is probably not your average flu. It's moved significantly enough so that it can challenge the present vaccination that's available. What that really means is that we've put in place for licensed premises on race day some requirements to continually try and maintain, if you like, the separation of the racing herd from everybody else. So we've asked initially when this started that all thoroughbreds that appeared on a racetrack were vaccinated within a 6-month period of time, and that is still the recommendation from the BHA Veterinary Committee. Any of these other horses that appear have to have nasal swabs and PCRs for flu before they can come on. And I can tell you in recent few weeks we had 2 of the military horses that were going to Royal Ascot, failed the test 2 days beforehand, and we've had two Arab horses that were racing at Bath 2 weeks ago, both fail. Most or all of the racing industry have grasped this 6-monthly vaccination. It is the cornerstone of the immunity against this particular clade 1 virus. So remembering, we don't think that full protection occurs, so we're not saying you should have 12 monthly vaccinations. We're saying we'd like you to be having 6 monthly vaccinations, because the more you vaccinate, the more immunity you're going to have, and that's especially important in this young horses. So when we see those horses that have first and second vaccinations, what I call V1, V2, and then have a third vaccination, which is 150 to 215 days from their second one, there is often a dip in immunity before those horses actually get their third vaccinations. So my take-home message to you all as breeders is I would be vaccinating my brood mares. I would be thinking about significantly, do I start my vaccination procedures on my young horses at that 6 to 8 month old age group? And do I try and complete that whole course of that vaccination so that when these horses arrive at licensed premises or sales yards or whatever else, they've already got a body of immunity behind them. That's our protection until we can see what this is doing. My personal opinion at the moment is we haven't seen the end of this. I still think that at some point you can see here, I think last week AHT reported 12 cases or 12 outbreaks of flu in the UK. Last year they reported 2 cases for the whole year, and the year before 4 cases. So you can see this is just humming away in the background in pleasure horses. Your defence is vaccination, it's biosecurity, it is trying to separate from those other premises if you can. Part of that, and Simon Cooper's going to talk about this in a few minutes, part of my little push here is Weatherby's Island, with Irish Racing and the BHA, are developing an online app for vaccinations. This is cloud-based. This is going to go into a trial phase in September. I'm going to trial it over here in 6 yards. It looks like it's very simple for your veterinary surgeons to do this, because I know what veterinary surgeons are like. I am one. We hate anything that looks like it's hard work. It can be validated so that veterinary surgeon gives the vaccinations. You can record them, and I'd be asking you, this can be set up so that you could start off your 6 and 8 month old foals into this system, record those vaccinations. That's going to stay with that horse no matter where it goes. So we could turn up as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old in a racing yard, and all the BHA's got to do is go click over here, and it's got a validated vaccination system. We're no longer looking at vaccinations in race day. We're no longer having to send horses home from races. And that's, I think, is a great move being. But Simon's going to talk about this as part of his digital passport part, but I think this is, again, a fabulous piece to get that done.